President, can you explain why you did not condemn those hate groups by name over the weekend?
They've been condemned. They have been condemned.
And why are we not having a press conference today? You said on Friday we had a press conference.
We had a press conference. We just had a press conference.
Can we ask you some more questions then, sir?
It doesn't bother me at all, but I like real news, not fake news. You're fake news.
Do you regret not saying something about that?
Haven't you spread a lot of fake news yourself, sir?
Thank you, Press.
That's President Trump calling a CNN reporter fake news at an event yesterday. Joining us now, New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters and White House correspondent for Reuters, Jeff Mason. He's the former president of the White House Correspondents Association. Gentlemen, good morning to you both. Jeff, let me start with you. The frustration of not having press conferences with President Trump over the first 7 years. I think, as Hallie was saying earlier, I think there's part of him who believes that actually was a press conference. The fact that he stood at a podium, there were cameras there, he delivered remarks and walked out of the room. How hard did you fight? How hard did you try to get President Trump to do more press conferences?
Well, when I was president of the Correspondents Association, it was a constant part of our outreach to the White House, in addition to making sure the cameras stayed on during briefings, and we had a period where that wasn't happening. But in general, we pushed very hard, and I know the association will continue to push really hard for press conferences, for access, for abilities to ask the questions that we need to ask.
And what is the pushback? Why the resistance? Why the reluctance to give a formal press conference?
Well, I think part of it is what you just said. I mean, I think when the president said on Friday we're going to have a big press conference on Friday, he genuinely thought yesterday was a big press conference because he got in front of cameras, he made a statement that where reporters were present, and that was a press event. And I'm not sure that he sees the difference between the two. Of course, there is a difference because a press conference is where reporters who cover the White House have a chance to question him.
Yeah. Part of the issue, not the issue, but part of what you're seeing to me too is that when he goes to these pool sprays, so that's the ones where the small group of reporters that travel with him go into the room, when he goes to them and then takes 50 questions like he did at the end of last week in Bedminster, he feels like, hey, that's enough. It is, to be clear, from a journalist press perspective, not enough, right? Because you're not with the entire group of media that covers you. It's not an extended period where you're taking these questions.
But we do welcome it. We certainly welcome it.
It's not bad. You're not going to discourage that. But that is also, you saw a lot of things, it was a de facto press conference. Well, it wasn't really. He's only held one.
What do you say? Let me ask you this question. What do you say to the average American who's just watching? He doesn't care about what we want, right? You know, he's watching this. We watched Trump last week. Trump took a lot of questions last week. Now, he took them all from Phil Rucker one day, and he took them all from,
Peter Alexander the next
day. I mean, it's one reporter. It's not the whole press corps. But like for the average American who's sitting around going, well, I saw the guy on TV the other day. He took 30 questions. I saw him on TV the day after that. He took 30 more questions. Why do I care if I'm the average voter? Why do I care whether it's a press conference versus the president's taking questions?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of upsetting facts entailed in the answer that you're looking for. One of them is that the average American doesn't operate on our clock. They're still thinking he's only been there for 6 months. A lot of them saying, give the guy a break. He's only been there for 6 months. We're thinking the 6 months seems like 72 years because there's something every single day. The other aspect is, unfortunately, for the country, for history, for who we are as a country, the fake news thing has sunk in, and it's taken hold in a lot of areas in this country, unfortunately, sadly.
So, Jeremy, let me ask you, in some of your reporting here, about one of the press events that was not a press conference, but it was an event on Saturday where Donald Trump made the now infamous comment about on many sides, that there was hate on many sides, in addressing what happened in Charlottesville that day. Why did he say it? Where did it come from? What was behind that particular remark, which looked to most of us like an ad lib off the text he was reading from?
Right. Well, I think that in explaining why Trump was so reluctant to call out by name white supremacists and Nazis who were clearly responsible for the death that occurred in Charlottesville, it's important not to confuse the policy or the politics with the personality. And you have a 71-year-old, very stubborn man who is very reluctant to do what everybody is telling him to do at any given time. And in that that case, this was to call out white supremacists. But if you spend a lot of time in the conservative media where Donald Trump is an avid consumer, what you will hear a lot of is that a violent, unhinged, and anarchical left is responsible for just as much hatred and violence as the far right. And, you know, while it is definitely true that this country needs to have a debate where one side doesn't call the other Nazis all the time, the fact is it's not many sides. It's one side that's responsible for the deaths, and statistics show that. And the president and many on the right seem reluctant to acknowledge that.
And Noah, this goes exactly to your piece in commentary, which is to say that the death on Saturday was the work, allegedly, of a white nationalist, of a white supremacist, of a man who sympathized with Nazis. But the frustration you perhaps heard from President Trump and other Republicans is that Democrats and progressives are not asked every time there's some political violence at a rally by Antifa or a group like that to respond to it and to react to it.
Yeah, I had the privilege of speaking with Jeremy the other day about this very topic. When we're talking about a body count, it's too late. We've already let the phenomenon go too long, and we've allowed it to metastasize too much. This event in Sacramento that we talked about last year was a really pivotal event, and the fact that Democrats were not pressed about how this violence was started by liberal leftist organizations sort of allowed it to go unanswered, and it wasn't the last time that had happened. And the event that we saw in Virginia was an extension of that event. It won't be the last time. Everybody needs to go on record, both left and right, and say that these groups don't represent us. These groups are on the fringe, and they deserve to be on the fringe. And nobody is asking the right people that question. I think that's something that conservatives are right to say, that should happen, legitimate and justified to say it. And the fact that some of the press maybe sneer at that suggestion is indicative of the problem.
Yeah, Jeff, the president meant what he said on Saturday. He believes that there's violence on many sides, including from Antifa and these groups on the left. The comments he made yesterday had the appearance of someone who'd been sort of backed into a corner and forced to say what he said.
It did, and I think you can back that up by the fact that this is somebody who does share his opinions pretty routinely on Twitter, and he did not take to Twitter to talk about white supremacists. He didn't address that and say that out loud until he was at the White House yesterday.
Jeremy Peters, thank you very much. We'll be reading your piece. Just went up in the New York Times. A fascinating look at those comments. Jeff Mason, great to see you. Thank you as well.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.